It's time for the biggest non-league football debate in the country. Search official BOTN and get involved with tonight's show.
Hello and welcome to Back of the Net non-league debate. My name is Charlotte Richardson and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Jody Brown, Frank Wilson and from the non-league paper Alex Narey. Gents, another busy week in non-league and we've just seen the news down at Billericay Town, another manager out of a job. Jody, are we surprised by this decision?
Surprised that they just won 6-2 last night, beat Southend in the Essex Senior Cup. So it's a strange time to get rid of a manager, but I suspect something's been rumbling for a while, so not overly surprised given Billericay's recent past.
And Frank, Billericay started the season so strongly and obviously they've had another managerial change and the new management have been in. Was it something that you anticipated given their run of results, particularly the way they've dropped in the league in recent weeks?
Well, I kind of echo what Jody said there. I think that off the back of a positive result, it's always a strange decision, but obviously there's expectations for the club, aren't there, in terms of how well they're expected to do. I think our stance as pundits or managers or coaches and what we expected the club to achieve this season, being a newly promoted side, would be probably completely different to Billericay's own ambitions. I thought it was an excellent appointment when he got the job, so to see him go so quickly, yeah, I was very surprised, very surprised.
I think it's a strip-out job, to be honest with you. I think the club they need to become a sustainable model rather than that kind of like 5-year business plan of getting into the Football League. You know, that wasn't the job that was sold to Dean Brennan, so yeah, I think it's a tough one. He's a good guy, and I'm sure he'll find another job and he'll be really well sought after, but yeah, I think it's a strip-out club and they're going to start again.
And the paper covered a story on Billericay in recent weeks. Do you think this is just another sign of trouble, both kind of on and off the pitch?
Well, since we broke that story, I think they've lost 6 and 7, and they've lost 7 players as well. You know, 5 of which were very big earners. You know, Jamie O'Hara and Jake Robinson, 2 of those star players. So, listen, they've changed direction hugely. The owner's nowhere to be seen. I think he's currently in the States, recovering from burnout. So, yeah, it's a very, very rocky ground. But this is what happens, you know, when clubs go out. They had a budget of £25,000 a week. That's ridiculous for that standard of football and for that level they're in. So, yeah, but it's I think it's going to be all changed. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are even more changes and the playing decks are stripped back even further.
And Jody, some change at Billericay, but even when we flip through the pages of the non-league paper, there's so many managerial changes throughout the season, so it felt like even more so. We've spoken in previous editions. Is there greater expectation now on non-league managers than ever before?
I'm not sure whether there's greater expectation. I think the exposure's bigger, so we see everything more and everything's emphasised more. This time of year is always a time where there's lots of managerial changes. Clubs sort of evaluate where they're at, where they wanted to be, and people start looking now at promotions, relegations, cup runs, things like that, and you often see changes, so I've got to be honest, I'm not really surprised.
And if we look at the action over this weekend, some big FA Trophy games. Frank, did any results catch your eye over the weekend?
Yeah, soft spot for the old Boston boys, Carl Shorten for me, Peter and Keith and the boys down there. Fantastic result, obviously Salisbury playing at the same level, but again to go away from home and get a positive result and an emphatic one at that. Great to see them progress through to the later stages, and what a dream draw really out of the clubs that were remaining in the competition to get Barnet and to get them at home. I'm going to go to that one myself, and I expect to probably see probably one of their record attendances for this season. Brilliant result.
Alex, with the fixture schedule, particularly at this time of year, and like Jody was saying, teams are eyeing up whether they're going to be going for promotion or fighting relegation.
Yeah.
With the FA Trophy final being at Wembley, that's a really big draw. Were there any teams that you think now that might be their setting standard for a place at Wembley?
Well, the holders, Brackley, and they've got a manager there, and Kevin Wilkin, who's an absolute master in this competition. So. And they had a fantastic one as well, away at Hereford, winning 3-1. So they're definitely a side who I can see going all the way again. But listen, you can't count out clubs like Salford, who have the muscle and the firepower and the squad to call on all. They can. I mean, they played Jody's guy a lot on Saturday and were too good for them, I believe. So you can't count out the big guns, but I just think that it's probably made for maybe a Brackley or someone to go again.
And Jody, your side Dagenham, they take on Maidstone this weekend. Maidstone got a decent result on Saturday and then had the defeat on Tuesday evening. The dynamic, obviously, between cup competition and the league, is it compatible, or sometimes can the trophy just be a bit of a distraction and unwanted minutes?
It's a difficult one to say, really. It's all relative to what you're trying to achieve and where you sit at that current time. So take Maidstone, for example. They're arguably in a relegation battle, so perhaps the trophy's a distraction. However, they've got a caretaker manager who wanted to win the game because that looks better in his attempt to get the job. I think had it been the same manager all season and they were in the bottom four and they had their trophy game at the weekend, they maybe would have weakened the side, rotated a little bit. I think they did actually anyway, because of a lot of their new signings are cup tied. But it maybe wouldn't have been such a priority. I always think it's the sentimental and traditional element of getting to Wembley. I find it hard to understand why anyone would go under strength, but if you are at the top of the National League, the prize of getting into the Football League is that big. Perhaps your priority has to be that, and you will play slightly weakened sides in the trophy. But I think mid-table, like Barnet, for example, if I was betting on someone to go to Wembley, I'd probably put a bit of money on Barnet. I think Darren Curry's gone in there. He'll want to win every game because he's trying to prove his worth. I don't think they're going to get promoted. They're certainly not going to get relegated. FA Cup run, trip to Wembley in the FA Trophy would be a great season.
I think a big problem for the trophy is the prize money on offer. It's not life-changing amounts of money, even for clubs like a Ramsbottom or a Carshalton. To get to Wembley, it costs clubs money. So it's not really that carrot that you get from the FA Cup and the prize fund and of course the TV money that comes with it. That's life-changing money, but with the trophy you don't have that.
Now, if you look at this round, the last 16, it's only 8,000 prize money, and let's be honest, how much does Salford City or Leyton Orient or Wrexham, those type of clubs, how much do they need £8,000?
Does that not alter the perception of the competition in some way, though? I always think that, obviously, everybody knows, and especially from this season onwards, how much money's been rewarded in the FA Cup rounds and how you get rewarded for your progression in that competition. But the FA Trophy, it's almost, as we know it, the non-league FA Cup, it's that version of it in terms of teams know that the prize money side of it isn't going to be the biggest reward. The reward is, can you get your team or can you represent yourself or your club at Wembley? So does that then mean that teams are, I don't know, not more honest, but, is there more of a challenge in that sense in terms of a personal reward, like you said, managers that want to put down on their CV, players that want to say, I represented my club at Wembley in this year.
There's no doubt about it. When the side gets to the trophy final, like Bromley and Brackley, spoke to both managers last year before the big day. Both of them, Neil Smith and Kev Wilkins, said, "Well, we eyed the trophy up from day one. We eyed a cup run, and the trophy was very, very important to us." Now, I think the trophy might have got in the way of Bromley's promotion push last season. They just missed out on the playoffs. Did it affect Brackley in their quest to get into the National League? Maybe it did, but when the National League clubs come in the first round of December, they're effectively 5-6 games away from Wembley with a 2-leg semi-final. So you are desperately close, and the fact that you can play at Wembley and it can be a day to remember for you is fantastic. But I just think it does come down to finances. There's not enough money being invested into the FA Trophy.
Is it not like the equivalent of the Carabao Cup? The big clubs get interested in the quarter-final and semi-final.
Exactly.
Before that point, when Wembley's still a distant thought, they're not really interested. If they manage to sneak through, playing their youngsters, rotating the squad, getting kind draws, and now they find themselves in the semi-final, all of a sudden you see strong 11s being put out and people recognising that they could be at Wembley.
Another point to quickly make on the trophy as well is that the new rule came in this season, didn't it? That clubs, if they could agree before the game, wouldn't have to play replays, which is another interesting element into it, that decision has been brought in this season, because it's another indicator, isn't it, that managers want a little bit of flexibility. And if we focus on Maidstone again for a minute, Frank, they've now got a long trip to Salford in the middle of a relegation battle. It's again that point, isn't it? Is that £7,000 worth it for a long old trip to Salford, when again you're trying to build momentum and some positive uplift?
Yeah, cool. Well, no, obviously. I think the short answer is no. Not if, we hope that doesn't happen, but not if they go up to Salford and get a heavy defeat. I don't think any amount of money to a degree, sensibly, would be enough to take in terms of another heavy loss and what impact that could have on their league form. But as Alex said, we'd all like to see clubs be rewarded with a bigger financial package. It's a massive competition, and I think that, to be honest, I think that for the lower clubs, obviously the Carl Shortens and the others, as Jody said there, if teams are going to be fielding at this stage of the competition a lesser side, it gives everybody down the pyramid much more of a chance to take a scout from one of the big teams. So it makes it interesting.
Finals days helped. The Vase and the trophy both being at Wembley on the same day. I think there've been combined crowds for the last 3 or 4 years of 40,000. So that's great. Bromley last season, I think they took 16 to 17,000, pretty much filled an end of Wembley, or certainly the lower tier. So the day itself, getting to the final, it's something to tell your grandkids about, and it's fantastic, but there's a lot of football to be played before you get there. 2-leg semi-finals as well, and just on the point about the replays, Bromley played Spennymoor last year. That went to a replay. They got up there, it was in the middle of the Beast from the East during March. I think they got all the way up there for the quarter-final. 20 minutes before the game started, called off. So, listen, it's football, it's non-league football, it's the price we pay, but I've no doubt the players love it and want to be involved in it, but if you asked every National League manager in December in the first round, where their priorities lay, I don't think they'd be laying in with the FA Trophy.
And guys, in your managerial experience, Jody, starting with yourself, how have you utilised cup runs to then support your league form? Has it been something you've been conscious of as a manager in the past to use both in a positive sense, but also when you're, for example, Harrogate this weekend on a pretty grotty run of form, get a good win away at Dover, can then uplift into their National League form? Well,
when I've managed in relegation battles, which I've done a couple of times, I've actually used the cup competitions as like a free hit. A time when there's no pressure on the players, express themselves a little bit more, played a little bit more expansively, and then in our case, we picked up positive results, and it reflected in our league form. So yeah, I think I think if it doesn't cause a fixture backlog, then yeah, utilise the cup competitions to find form, to get important players out on the pitch, to find their form. You can use it in a lot of ways, even though you might not go on and win the competition. There's still lots to gain from playing it, whether you're at the top of the league or at the bottom of the league. I do see the argument if you're at the very top, you're trying to win the National League, or you're trying to win the Bostik Premier League or the Bostik North or National, whichever league it is, that the cup competition may be a distraction. When promotion's that real, perhaps that cup run is a distraction. When I was at Haybridge last season, obviously we ended up playing 70 games and we missed out on automatic promotion by 3 points. Lost in the playoffs in our 71st game of the season. So you could say that the cup runs there were a hindrance. However, again, putting everything into perspective, at that level of football, at step 4 football, I think you'd rather have that hindrance than not have it, because Haybridge's profile's gone through the roof, and all the benefits that come with that exposure and profile and financial income that they're benefiting from, and hope, it looks like they could go and get promoted this year, so they've built upon that. But I think when you're higher and the prize is bigger, National League to the Football League, I think you've got to be aware not to let the cup become a hindrance.
But saying that, you can't rule out Salford from going all the way to Wembley. I think it would almost be a kind of story that they'd want. It's almost like get promotion into the Football League and leave with the FA Trophy.
Good documentary.
Exactly. I do believe that's a story that they kind of want to write and be part of. So the squad they've got there, the strength in depth, and the whole story, I just think that it could be made for them to go to Wembley. But probably go out in the next round now.
And Frank, how about your experience of kind of managing that dynamic of utilising cup competitions? Because like Jody said, 70 odd games in one season. There's a lot of them now, from county cup competitions, Bostik League competitions. It's almost never ending sometimes.
Yeah, towards the end of my tenure at Tooting, we kind of sort of talked about delegating, as we see in a professional game. The sort of academy and the youth team representation in terms of some of the cups, because I think we entered 6 cup competitions in total in a domestic season. So we prioritised, or we nominated certain cup competitions, and we then sort of represented the first team by picking under 18s or under 21s or development players, majoritively, or a combination of the two, or whatever it might have been. Some sort of mixed dynamic for certain cups, purely and simply not just to give those younger players exposure in first team environments, but also to help the senior teams sort of fixture congestion and to sort of ease it up a little bit. It makes it much easier to then manage that on a week-to-week basis, because we could then make decisions based on, you know, if we thought that, if we had, for example, if we nominated the Surrey Senior Cup to be a predominantly youth team set up in terms of who we put out, if we then felt that at whatever point of the season in October we've got a Surrey Cup game coming up, and we then wanted to give 3 or 4 of the first team players a game because of an injury or something like that, we could then manage that situation. It certainly helped clubs that were fortunate enough, like ourselves, that had those youth team setups, or you know, or that sort of those players in the background that you could then use. But when we won the league, last point I make on it, slightly different. Not at the time, but at the end of my first season, we finished strongly in the league, had a really poor start, and we then won the London Cup, and it was the most valued cup competition, strangely, by the supporters. Even more so than the FA Cup in some sort of strange way.
Local bragging rights.
Yeah, and we won the London Senior Cup, and everybody, including myself, put down our league title success the following year. We backdated that to the London Senior Cup victory, because we sort of finished strongly, and it gave everybody a sense of belief and thought, well, you know what, actually, you know, we've achieved something here. It's a platform to build on. So I think from one season to the next, it can help you, not just in the current season in terms of how well you do in a cup, to then how well that propels you in your league form. So.
And Alex, we've got pages and pages here of articles and opinions, and obviously you navigate through a lot of non-league support through the paper. Do you think sometimes it's almost a little bit overwhelming how many fixtures and cup competitions there are? Is there enough to meet demand, or actually do you think somehow kind of maybe streamlining fixtures a little bit might help clubs?
It's overwhelming for us. Yeah, I mean, 71 games last season, that's staggering. You did win Cup Team of the Year though with the non-league paper.
Deservedly so.
You'd have been fuming if you had.
Didn't get Bostik League team.
No.
We broke some national records, but the league didn't fancy it.
No.
Yeah, I think there's too much. You know, 71 games. It is just too much football for any club, no matter what your resources are. I just feel, and that's actually, I welcome the trophy replay idea. I think that's actually common sense, and that's you know, the two clubs coming into an agreement. It's black and white. They know what they've got ahead of them, so I've got no problem with that. And I think it's a good move. But it's just, you know, last season we really felt it as well with the bad weather. You're looking at some clubs towards the end of the season, they had 9 or 10 games to make up. So, yeah, I mean, the fixture programme is heavy, it's congested, but I can't see that changing anytime soon. It's the way it is, and it's the way it's always been. And we have, touchwood so far this season, been quite fortunate with there not too many postponed games. Jody, did you think there is almost too much non-league football?
I don't know. I don't think you can say that. I think the demand's there for more. The Bostik League reduced the numbers of teams. Yeah. There's a lot less midweek football for those Bostik teams, and I speak to the managers, the players, supporters, and they're all missing midweek football. So that's where these competitions come in handy. If you stay in the FA Cup, the FA Trophy, your County Cup, the Velocity Trophy, that will keep your midweek football alive. But if you go around the grounds and you speak to the supporters and like I say, players and managers, they're missing Tuesday night football at that level.
It's really interesting as well. And one topic I guess we haven't brushed upon yet is with all these fixtures, how you manage your squad. I think you were alluding to like depending on the youth a lot, but it can be hard with these intense periods, especially when we look at the lower leagues, when these players are part-time and they have jobs elsewhere. Like trying to preserve and keep your squad injury free is going to be difficult when you're doing well in competitions. Yeah, but non-league football's honest, isn't it? And I think that it's the same story for everybody. If you do well in a cup competition, yes, it's largely down to having a good team, but also what's got to play a huge part in it is being fortunate in terms of injuries and having players available, not suspended, fit. You know, it's almost like the recruitment process has got to change now. We've got to start as managers asking players what sort of jobs they've got, what sort of hindrances they might have in terms of midweek commitments and things like that, just to make sure that when you sign a player, you know that further down the line, you know, they're not going to have to sort of bail out on you because of something outside of the football commitment. But no, I think it's just something that we all accept when we take part of the job and we all enjoy it. Brilliant stuff. Well, that is us delving into the detail of the FA Trophy and Cup competitions. Now let's take a little look at some of the headlines in the non-league paper. And Alex, some great news on the front page for Leyton Orient. They've kept their main man and their striker. Great news for Orient supporters. Yeah, we had a call from Macaulay Bond's agent last week. We haven't had an official word from anyone at the club or anyone connected to Macaulay. So the agent actually phoned us. I mean, I'll be honest. The story does smack a little bit of an agent wanting to get his player's name on the front page and keep him under the spotlight. I don't think he's scored for a few weeks. So, listen, it is what it is. But what it does tell you is that there has been interest, because if you ask anybody at Leyton Orient, if you ask Justin Edinburgh, he'll say there's been no offers, there's been no conversations. But the agent is confirming that there has been interest. Whether there's been interest from the clubs that he lists there playing in the Premier League, I'm not so sure. But I just do think it's quite a nice line and quite a refreshing line, even if there is a bit of an agenda there, that what he's saying is he likes it at the club, he likes the fans, he wants to repay the fans for their loyalty and the support they've shown him. And I don't think he's going anywhere, particularly before the end of the season. I think he probably will go in the summer somewhere. If Leyton Orient get promoted, then his stock is very high. If they don't get promoted, then he will. I'm sure he'll try and force a move. But yeah, it is what it is. I think at the end of the day, when you've got a player like Macabon, who is definitely, he's 22 years old. He's definitely got a bright future in front of him. It's good news for Leyton Orient fans, and like I say, I'm sure he will stay there for the rest of the season, and then who knows in the summer. And Jody, when we spoke a few months ago about strikers and how important they are to a team, for Orient and their promotion challenge, keeping him over the January period must be a real bonus.
Yeah, I think so. They've got strength in depth though. Matt Harrold and Karoma, they're decent strikers as well. So if they could cash in, then I don't think it would be the end of the world. It depends what sort of offer was tabled, or if there was any offers. I know Macaulay Bond from working at Colchester when he was coming through the youth system there, and he's always been a natural goal scorer, like a one-touch finisher, instinctive forward, and he's already scored plenty of goals in the Football League. When he broke into the first team at Colchester, if you look at his goals to game ratio, it's very good. So I was always surprised that Colchester even let him go, given their philosophy at Colchester United to promote from within and to develop their own players. So it was a surprising departure. He's gone to Orient. I think he's proven to everyone that it was probably a mistake by Colchester to let him go. But it wouldn't be a risk for a Football League club to take him, because he's already proven he could score at that level 2-3 years ago. The Premier League, though, I no disrespect to Macaulay, he's definitely got bright potential, but I think it would be a big jump to go National League to the Premier League. Certainly the kind of player that he is.
And we've spoken in the past as well about National League and non-league football being a really good platform, especially with the exposure nowadays. And this headline and this story is another example, isn't it, of how particularly young professionals, like we said in the past as well, coming from academies back and forth, it can be a real launch pad, can't it? Yeah, but I think the nice sort of romanticism of it is, for once, it's a headline that sees a player, like Alex said, commit himself to his club. And I think that what we all expect at this time of the year is to see the sort of the non-league stars
make their way and get signed from non-league football and make their way into professional football. So it's nice for a change to see a high-profile non-league player actually remain at his club until the end of the season or until the foreseeable future. So yeah, fantastic that we're getting the exposure and that players are being talked up even as highly as Premier League. But nice to also see them sort of remain in the dwellings of non-league football.
I think Justin Edinburgh signing a new contract as well is an important factor in it all.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the guys. I think he's one of the boys. I think he's just hugely respected there, and I think him signing on the dotted line and committing his future would have probably just given Macaulay a bit more enthusiasm to see this season out and see where they go.
But also put it into perspective. Leyton Orient aren't really a non-league football club. Having been there over the Christmas period, that's a football league club. Yeah. You know, if he's sensible and the advisors around him are sensible, they're going to say, look, this is a club going somewhere. They've got new owners. It's really bustling around that club at the moment. A lot going on, a lot of positivity. They look likely to get promoted, and they could go again. They could go into League Two and go again. They've got the infrastructure in place, so I think you'd be sensible to stay put.
And Alex, a point we made at the opening of the show with the departure of the Billericay Town manager, we flip through the pages here as well, and we see that Chesterfield have appointed a manager. You have an interview with Jay Saunders there. Justin Edinburgh signing a contract extension. It kind of begs the question as well of the longevity of non-league managers and how much faith is put in long-term managers. Do you think we'll see the likes of the Chris Kinnears and the Tony Burnhams at Dartford and other long-term managers being given a considerable amount of time to develop and progress a football club?
I think they're a dying breed. I really do. I just think that if you use the Maidstone example, what are Maidstone's ambitions? What are their aspirations? Are they being realistic? This is a club that, with Jay Saunders at the helm, I think he won them 3 promotions. When they got rid of him, I think they were 5th or 6th from bottom, so they weren't, and it was very early in the season. Were they thinking they're going to get out of the National League this year? I mean, I'm not quite sure what a club like Maidstone, who else they're going to go out and get. Do they think they're going to get someone better than Jay Saunders, a club legend who'd done so well for them? So I just think clubs panic. I think they think to themselves they're in a hurry to get somewhere, and I'm not sure their aspirations are realistic sometimes. So I was as shocked as anyone when Jay left the club back in September, and as we all know, they haven't recovered since his exit. So Chesterfield, of John Sheridan going in there, I think he's being paid the highest wage in the National League, and I think it might even be the highest manager even in League Two. So across the board, across National League and League Two. So and he's been there before. He's got a tough job on his hands though. They're in the bottom 4, and they're playing Aldershot on Saturday, so massive task ahead for him. I just think, like I say, it's a dying breed. Those guys who are given time to build their squads, to build their ideologies. I just think it's very, very tough now. So it's a shame, and like I say, Dean Brennan at Billericay, I think we could all see that coming, a few months ago when the squad started to break up and Glenn Tamplin stayed away. So yeah, it's a rocky time to be a manager, always is.
Frank, is that a sentiment you agree with? Obviously, even if we take the Chesterfield example, a lot of money being thrown at the manager and then instant results will be expected because of the salary that he demands. Is it fair? Is it right?
Oh, it's such a difficult question to. Yeah, I think it's fair. It all depends on the situation, to be honest. I think that when you're working at the sort of Tier 1 at the highest level of non-league football, it's such a mirror image of professional football anyway. Then I think that the expectations and what we see happen has got to emulate what we see happen in League Two and the divisions above. Yes, the turnover of management and players in non-league football is particularly high. Like Alex, do I think that it's going to change? Probably not. I think that the current trend at the minute is to sort of see, more and more turnover, more and more opportunity. Going back to Maidstone and Jay leaving. Again, I don't think that chairmen think enough about profiling management or managers before they come into clubs. And that's no disrespect to Harry in this example, but we talked about him on the show last week. You know, to follow in the footsteps of someone that's been so important at a football club and so successful. You know, I would have expected a club of their stature to have gone with someone that would have had much more experience in the division or in the role. And I do think that chairmen and clubs jump at the decision sometimes in terms of how quickly they appoint people. But is that because it's important to make decisions quickly so that it doesn't fall to what happens at the club in terms of league form? Are we losing faith in the temporary management or temporary or caretaker staff? Resources are limited or more limited in non-league football. There aren't enough people in the background or assisting managers to be able to take the lead role, you know, and that might be something that plays a part in why decisions get made so quickly.
I think managers in non-league football are quite vulnerable. I think because it's quite, clubs are quite insular and a manager can be quite close to a boardroom. And I just feel that if he doesn't get on with the board, if there's someone in the boardroom he doesn't get on with, or there's a clash of personalities, it escalates quickly. Whereas the higher up you go, and Jody might disagree with me, but I just feel the higher up you go, managers are slightly more protected from all of that. And their personalities and their character and the jobs they've done in previous roles that have got them to where they are, they carry a bit more weight. Whereas I think in non-league football, because you haven't achieved as much as those guys have, you can be a bit vulnerable with boards. I just feel like you can be dismissed too quickly and you can clash with people too quickly. And once that happens, it's a bit of a slippery road.
He's right, lower down, and you'll know, and you know, committee members are basically supporters. Yeah. Supporters are fickle people. So you go in the bar after a game at Step 3, Step 4 club, a supporter goes, oh, you know, what on earth did you pick him for today?
And they know best, don't they? They've been involved in the club for years. So and he's not just a supporter; he's actually the club secretary or a committee member of some other type, a treasurer, whatever. And you know, very quickly you can become unpopular. So yeah, I totally agree with what Alex is saying. And higher up, it's just I use the term a lot on here, I know, but it's the professionalism. It's just, you know, there's a divide between committee members and the first team manager, and that was maybe a managing director or a CEO. Director of football. You've got press officers, or it's just you can get on with your job that you're meant to do without people sticking their noses in. And
That's a very valid point as well, particularly with young up-and-coming managers. They don't necessarily, particularly at non-league, where it is so ferocious and results-driven. Jody, do you think it's even harder for younger managers to break through now because they're not necessarily granted the time to make mistakes? Obviously, you had a lot of experience with your previous club at building that over a period of time. Do you think it's a lesser chance now for others behind you to have that?
It's hard for me to say that there's not an opportunity for it, because I climbed through the leagues pretty quick. I came back down and I'm going about another journey now. But I do think there's a pathway there. It's not an easy pathway. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of who you know rather than what you know involved in your progress as a young manager. It takes someone to believe in you, and someone who's in a powerful position, i.e. a chairman or a well-known ex-player, or someone putting their sort of support to you as a young coach that gets that exposure, and then you get these opportunities. But then when you go in, you have to do well, because every step I took, I did well until when I went to Welling, and I didn't do well, didn't get the results, got sacked very quickly, and then people are scared to hire you. That's how it is in football, unfortunately. They don't look at what you did as a young manager, like Alex said about older managers and more experienced managers at the higher level. You look at their previous achievements. But when you're 35, say, or like Harry, people don't, they kind of dismiss your previous achievements and say, oh, they were lucky or they were fortunate, or like we say with Harry, he had an unbelievable budget. And they kind of dismiss them and just solely focus on your one failure, which is contradictive of football in general, because we look at the top level and we've just got these people fail, new job, fail, new job, fail, new job. And you kind of think, well, where's the sense in that? You wouldn't do it in any other industry, but it's deemed that they can manage elite players, they can manage in that environment, they can handle the process and the press, and so they keep getting these opportunities. But you do at some point have to break the mould. You know, like, would Eddie Howe ever have managed in the Premier League had he not got promoted into the Premier League with his club? I doubt he would have done. And I think there's a lot of young managers like that. Unless you can get promoted through the divisions, you might not get the opportunities.
If you look at Anthony Limbrick last year at Woking, nearly said Aldershot then, they'll forgive me for that. But if you look at what he was doing at Woking, he started out really well. Then the wheels started to come off after Christmas, and then the board members started to come out and talk a bit more. And Jeff Chappell, Woking legend, you know, came on board a little bit more and was at more games. And Gary Hill returned and was coming to games, and it just created this atmosphere that he was kind of boxed in. And it was no surprise when they eventually got rid of him, but it just left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth how that happened. This young, aspirational guy who's obviously got some coaching ability.
Extremely well spoken,
exactly,
brilliant in his interviews, bright guy, great coaching background through academy football. He'll probably go on to achieve, I'm not looking to upset Woking fans, I suspect he'll go on to achieve more than managing Woking. He was dismissed very quickly. And when you're a young manager, you don't just get dismissed and they don't just say, oh, it's unfortunate results and it goes away. They kind of make you into this pantomime idiot. Oh, he's, you know, clown, doesn't, you know, not a manager. Who is this man impersonating a manager? Well, you know, that's the kind of comments you get. Yet you could be, let's think of one, Paul Lambert, if he's watching, Paul Lambert, he's just failing in every job he's in. No one calls him a clown. No one's, you know, because he's Paul Lambert, because he had one success at Norwich City 10 years ago. So now he can just keep failing, and he's not a clown. He's not inexperienced. He's not a coach, not a manager, and all these cliches that you get thrown at you as a young manager. He just keeps failing. But if you're in your 30s or early 40s, or it's your first job, if you get it wrong, you're done.
There'll be some old timer that disagrees with the way you do things, and it just escalates quickly. And I think managers in non-league, particularly young managers, are a vulnerable breed, because they've either got to get results really quickly, or they've got to have a good career behind them that's really solid, and a reputation that people sort of kind of jump on and respect. So it's tough. It's a tough time to be a young manager. It's not getting easier. You know, I just feel that they need more support from the boards.
The problem is if you actually want to break the mould as a football club, if you actually want to kick on out of your level where you are, so I don't know, you're a Bostik Premier team, for example. So like Frank's a manager, hugely successful at Tooting and Mitcham, hasn't managed now for how long? A year?
The whole season.
A year. So if you're a Bostik Premier club, and you just keep going around the same old roundabout, the same managers, what makes you think anything's going to change? Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Why not get Frank in? Why not? He's won the Ryman South, he's won the London Senior Cup. All right, for whatever reason he parted company with Tooting and Mitcham. Was he suddenly a clown? Suddenly a bad manager? And you've got these mid-table Bostik Premier League clubs, from what I understand, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but doesn't even get the opportunity to speak to them.
Frank, is that something you would say? You know, you do fit the category of a young up-and-coming non-league manager. Do you find it a struggle sometimes, and do you feel like your age and the scrutiny is slightly more microscopic should you not be maybe 10 years further along in your career?
It's difficult for me to determine it, really, because I haven't been through the interview process, because my applications in the jobs that I've applied for haven't been successful. I'll say that honestly. So I haven't had the feedback where I've sat in front of a board or a chairman and they've said, we're going in this direction because of seniority, or we think that you're a little bit too young at the moment, so we're looking at something different. Difficult to put your finger on how people that run football clubs think. You know, I think we all wish, when we're out of a job, I think we all wish that the blueprints would be a lot clearer, so that we then knew how to prepare better for that. But it does seem to be this ageism thing where it's either it's like youth versus seniority, you know, and there's an emphasis on both, you know, clubs or chairman, either they want young, hungry, aspiring coaches or managers, or they want to go the complete opposite route and they want to get someone that's got years and years and years of experience. And it's almost something that plays against each other at times. I certainly think that people from previous generations, I do think that there is a stigma attached to young coaches and young managers. And I guess it's, you know, earning your stripes, isn't it? It's managers that have been doing it for 20, 30 years.
But you did earn your stripes. You won the
league.
No,
I get that, but I guess that it's almost like people want to see you go through this rigorous process of earning your rewards in football and what that might mean for you further down the line.
But so it goes back to what I said.
Yeah.
As a young manager, you can have success and it's dismissed as lucky or money or a one-off or whatever as soon as you have a failure.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're an experienced manager in his late 50s and you won the Bostik Premier League in 1996 and you won it 3 times, but 3 times on the bounce, unbelievable to him, but you haven't won a thing for the last 20 years, why is he deemed a better bet than you, who's won trophies, good trophies, in the last 2 or 3 years?
Alex, do you think the glare and the buzz around non-league football, and particularly we've spoken about on this show as well, with social media nowadays, do you think that kind of exposure plays a part to the hindrance? Because when you look at the sort of older school managers, their history, they're not kind of all over social media. The interviews aren't everywhere online. Like one quote that you said, you know, in the heat of the moment in a post-match interview doesn't necessarily come back to haunt you in the way it has this season. We have seen it impact, particularly, again, on young, maybe less mature managers.
Yeah, I mean, we're all on Twitter. It can be pretty toxic. And it's the first place that people go to vent their frustration and anger, and your football club, your management team, and your players, they'll come under fire on there. So I think that's a very good point. I think the pressures that young managers, all managers have to deal with now through social media, through debate shows like we're doing now, it's relentless. Everybody has an opinion, and I just feel that it's for a young manager now going in, you need to have very, very thick skin. You really do, and you need to have a clear vision of where you're going, and be prepared to accept that there might be some knockbacks along the way. But you're absolutely right. Social media and that platform that fans have, whereas it used to just be 90 minutes on a Saturday afternoon, where they could vent their frustrations, sing a few songs, you know, chant what they wanted to chant, and then they'd go home, and then they'd recharge their batteries, and hopefully in the next game you'd be better off, and you wouldn't have that problem again. But it just rolls and rolls and rolls, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And you know, with Harry at Maidstone, and I don't want to keep on bringing poor old Harry up, because as we said last week, we think he's got a bright future. Following Jay Saunders, who was a club legend, going in there, you know, he needed to get off to an electric start. He got off to a good start, but then the wheels came off slightly, and I saw some pretty horrible stuff thrown at him on social media, on Twitter, by grown men. You know, these aren't kids. That's the most disturbing part of it. These are kind of grown adults. So you need to have really, really thick skin. You need to have a real clear vision, and you need to be pretty forthright in what you're doing. But because, like, as you say, the social media element has heaped so much pressure onto the job now. It's relentless.
Brilliant. Thank you guys for your perspective on it. It's really, really interesting to hear the different dynamics of so much content in the paper. That's all we have time for looking at the non-league paper, but let's have a quick look at other results from this weekend. There was plenty of action in the National League South and North. Did you guys pick up on any of the results? I mean, we can take a quick look at the team of the day on our screen. Dartford, Phil Roberts, starting the team of the week in the paper this week, scored 2 late goals. A massive, massive result for Dartford, who now push up to the playoff places, Alex.
Yeah, they're on the climb. They're moving in the right direction. Had a really sticky start to the season. obviously Tony Berman left in the summer, so there's been putting some building blocks in place that they're on the climb and they're moving in the right direction. And they actually, I suppose the result for me was the main featured game on that spread, the Bath result, and they've kept themselves in touch with Woking and Torquay at the top of the table, and it's all set up for Bath versus Torquay on Saturday, which will be a super game. But I mean, like I say, Dartford are on the climb, and I fully expect them to be there or thereabouts come the end of the season.
Jody, with the top two not in action, it was a really, really important win for Bath City. How important is that when you're kind of pushing for the top spot, when your other promotion contenders aren't playing to snatch the 3 points to catch up?
Well, it's simple, really. If you get the 3 points, you put pressure on them when they come back into action. If you don't, they're all looking at their phone, seeing the score come through and go, "I'll get in." Nothing's changed and we've got a game in hand. So it's important that when you play, when your direct rivals don't play, that you pick up points. It keeps it as a 2.5 team race at the moment. It's not quite 2 horse. I think it will be in a few weeks' time, but at the moment, Bath are just keeping their toes in there.
And Frank, it was another loss for Billericay, and one that obviously proved to be the final kind of nail in the coffin, despite a victory in the Essex Cup.
I mean we've talked them to death, haven't we, Billericay? And sadly, their league form and just what's going on at the club is just becoming too distracting for them. Even on a budget as big as theirs, and with players as high profile as they have, despite some of the ones that they've lost, it shows that there's a very human side to football, and there's a real leveler in that sense in terms of how much pressure you can feel as a player, in terms of what distractions go on at your football club and behind the scenes. And I think that they're feeling that at the minute. Some good news. I've seen that Sam Deering's made his comeback now from injury, and he's been on the bench in the last few games. So possibly some optimism there in terms of good players that they're going to get back that are going to strengthen the team, and that can undoubtedly change results. We're going to have to wait and see in terms of the next managerial appointment and what implications that's going to have for that football club, and see what pathway they go down from here.
Strange one though, isn't it? Because they signed Jamal Loza from Maidstone, who was on loan at Woking, doing really well. So they've allowed him to buy him.
They've just started to sign a few players.
Yeah.
Nowhere near the quality of the ones they've lost.
I think they're signing boys that can commit to full time.
Yeah.
So I think they're signing players that can train during the day. But it just seems strange. Is someone else making the signings about to step in? I just think, would you let a manager spend that money and then get rid of him a couple of days later? Odd situation.
And we will see it unfold. And looking at the North, Chorley, another fantastic win for them this week, and they're at the summit and enjoying life.
Yeah, they are. They look good. They've looked good all season. Bradford Park Avenue have been kind of biting at their heels, but Chorley do look really strong. And but I've been saying for the last few weeks, Stockport for me are the club that have it in them to make that charge, and I think they're third now. I think they've won 6 on the spin. Any club that's bringing in gates of 4,000 each week, they are. Jody mentioned it earlier about Leyton Orient. Stockport County are a Football League team, still really in the numbers that they get through their gates. So I really do expect. The North is a really strong league. It's very, very tough. You've got some massive clubs down there. Kidderminster, Hereford are struggling, but they've got the muscle to get themselves back up the table as well. So, Chorley, but they're on merit. I think they're 5 points clear at the moment, and I think they've got it in them to stay there. But they'll have a battle on their hands from Stockport.
And it'd be remiss not to mention the Bostik leagues as well. Frank, any results catching your eye in the Prem or in any of the other Bostik divisions?
Yeah, I think we talked about Haringey Borough, didn't we, a lot in the recent weeks, and obviously the run of form that they've been on in winning successively. So to see them get a shock defeat at Harlow was a big surprise for me, really. Sort of always in the back of my mind thought, probably given how well they've been playing, that they were probably going to get. Well, see, if they were going to get beat, it was probably going to come against a team that might not be doing so well.
We gave them the kiss of death, didn't we?
Yeah,
we said we don't give them enough credit.
Yeah.
We gave them loads of credit.
So if he's watching, the gaffer's watching, maybe we should stop talking about it completely.
I chose that game last week as a star featured game for the paper, as it's featured in that issue there, and I just couldn't believe it when the score came in. But fair play to Harlow.
Good for Harlow. And
it highlights the point, doesn't it? Like we say, particularly in the Bostik League, it's such an open division that a couple of results. I mean, look at Folkestone. A couple of months ago, they were on a really poor run. Jody, they won 5-0 at the weekend. So it does show, doesn't it, like how open and exciting the Bostik Leagues are.
Yeah, no, they're tough divisions. I think anyone who's worked in them knows they're tough divisions, competitive leagues, and they can be erratic to a degree because there's so much coming and going, so many non-contract players. There's lots of change. So you could play a team in August, then play them again in February, and you play in two different teams. So yeah, so it's a tough league, and yeah, you always see some standout results.
Yeah, that's actually it's probably out of the four Step 4 divisions now. I think the Bostik is probably the most levelled in terms of you don't see. I know Folkestone won 5-0, you don't see hammerings, whereas in the Northern Premier League and Southern Premier League you do see those scores. The likes of Kettering and Weymouth and Farsley Celtic and Scarborough and South Shields are just a lot more stronger than what's below them. Yeah. The gulf's bigger, whereas in the Bostik League I think it's a lot more congested.
Brilliant. Well, we'll see this weekend's results unfold, and plenty for us to discuss next week, I imagine, as well. And as if there wasn't enough to talk about in the non-league paper and non-league football as a whole, it would be remiss not to ask you guys what your thoughts are on the big story this week in the Football League, Spygate. Jody, starting with you, what do you make of it? Is it right? Is it ethical under any sense at all to spy on your opposition?
I think it's all being exaggerated, if I'm honest. I think that you'll learn a lot more from watching their games, and you've got access to all the footage from all the games. So I think you learn everything you need to know within that anyway. If he thinks he can get a 1% advantage from checking out training over a fence, then I don't see a massive problem. You know, if as a result of this, the Football League or the FA want to put a rule in place that you can't watch people's training, I think it's going to be, it's going to be hard to police and regulate, and generally just cause more problems than it's worth, because who's a spy and who isn't? You know, you go to a training ground, you see lots of people wandering around, and what are you going to do? Make it a closed shop, no one can come in? Or, you know, I could ask Frank to go and watch his mate's training tomorrow because I might be playing him in 2 weeks' time. Is he a spy? I don't think it had any bearing on the result whatsoever, and I think the media are just loving it to build it into this great big issue that for me doesn't really exist.
The word pantomime, Alex, do you think it is a bit of a media circus over nothing?
I think it's the biggest non-story in football in recent years. I really do. I don't have a problem with it. I kind of would take it for granted that most managers would do it, to be honest with you. And I agree with Jody. I don't think you're getting that much of an advantage. You're certainly going to get more advantage going to see them in a game. I just find it a bit baffling. And there's nothing in the rules that says he's done anything wrong. So he's come out and addressed it, said, yep, I've done it before. There's nothing in the rule book that says he can't do it. I suppose what has got my back up a little bit in the last week is journalists coming on board and saying, oh, it's unethical, it goes against the game's morals. Well, do me a favour. I'm pretty sure quite a lot of journalists have spied on training sessions before and leaked information. So, no, for me, it's been a bit of fun. We've all got a few lines out of it, so to speak, and I just can't really see it going anywhere. But, fair play for the Leeds management team coming out and admitting to it.
And not only have they admitted to it, I understand just before we came on air there was a press conference where the Leeds United manager has gone through all his analysis. Does it just amplify the pantomime of it? Obviously, for Frank Lampard and his Derby County staff, they weren't happy with it at all. How would you feel if it had been you that was being spied on, Frank?
Flattered. We had our own version of Spygate at Tooting, but it was from one of our own supporters. So when we had a fella called.
Don't name him, mate.
No.
You'll get one of those clips that I normally get. Don't do it.
All right. Well, we had someone that used to. I'll talk about it off air and I'll name him. But we had someone that used to come and turn up to our training sessions. But because he would go on the forums and then he was just an example of a fan that would write detrimental things about you even if you won. But he would come to training just to see who was training, and then as a sort of a bit of a busybody, he'd then go on the forums and say, oh, he was there tonight, you know, I hope we're not going to be signing him, or he was rubbish in training tonight. So we used to turn up to training most nights and sort of have a look over at the field that was at the back of where we trained and just sort of hoping to see someone there. But
seen some suspicious dog walkers.
Yeah. But nah, listen, psychological games, isn't it? I think, you know, we've seen some masterminds like Mourinho that have always been brilliant at that side of the game. I think this is just another example of that, in terms of just trying to, you know, get one over on your opponent by getting in their heads and distracting them from the performance. It done exactly that. They talked about it in the build-up. They lost the game. So sadly, it was a consequence of good gamesmanship, I guess.
Yeah. And he said he's done it his whole career, and he's done it every game this season. So
maybe a bit of pioneering going on there.
you watch like every trend in coaching, people are going to start doing it. I guarantee it.
There's no way he's the only guy that's done it either. I just can't believe that for a second. He's the only one. He's the first one that's got caught. So
well, let's see. Maybe some non-league managers will confess after watching this. We would love to hear your thoughts, and you can be part of the dialogue online via our social media channels. Gents, thank you so much for your opinions and insights. It's been another really fascinating debate with you all. That is just about all we have time for. So I would like to thank Frank, Jody, and Alex. And until next time, enjoy football, and we'll see you soon.